Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Roithmayr. I have the privilege of being the CEO of the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. I want to welcome you to November, an Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Anybody who's wearing purple, it makes you much smarter and better looking, right? Number one. Number two, welcome to the 9th annual Fall Luncheon to benefit the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. We are at our 20-year anniversary this year. You're going to hear about how the ADDF is making a difference in Alzheimer's by advancing the development of biomarkers and the most promising drugs across the world. But before we get into all that, we need to brag a little bit on the luncheon, and I'd like just to see a show of hands. How many people were at last year's luncheon? Thank you and welcome back. And if you'll remember, we had a fabulous honoree last year. Her name is Ms. Sharon Sager. Sharon, where are you? And if you remember, last year Sharon blew away the all-time record for this luncheon. She had a 20% year-over-year increase, raised $1.2 million. And about 2.5, 3 weeks ago, I called Sharon and I said, Sharon, I've got some good news, I've got some bad news. And she says, what's that, Mark? And I said, I don't think your record's going to stand anymore. I think we're going to blow by your record. And Sharon's response to me, and bless her for this, is, that's nothing but good news, Mark. And all the new people here this year, can you raise your hands? It is so fabulous to have you because we have a phenomenal honoree this year, Mr. David Weinreb. And you know, David's somebody who likes the numbers and likes the challenges. And he met Sharon and the gauntlet was kind of thrown. And I can tell you that this year, we are running 25% ahead of last year, the all-time record. We come in a little close to over 1.3, almost 1.4 million. And we have a chance to beat 1.5 million this year, which would be a $300,000 increase. And that's because of all of you, new to us, veterans with us. We could not do this without your support. You are what makes our foundation strong, and we thank you. It is now my privilege to introduce our host today. She is a 9-time Emmy winner journalist, executive producer and host of Discovery ID's weekly crime show, On the Case with Paula Zahn. She is host of public television WNET's NYC Arts, a fabulous, fabulous show. As well, she is an accomplished cellist who's performed at Carnegie Hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome an incredible friend, board member, advocate, passionate, Paula Zahn.
Thank you, Mark, for the very generous introduction, and good afternoon, all of you. I am very honored to be back with you today as the host of the 9th annual Hope on the Horizon Luncheon. On behalf of the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation and its founders, Leonard and Ronald Lauder, who are here along with members of this family, why don't we give you some attention at table number 6 here. All the family members, I guess we're spread out throughout the room. But of course, I welcome all of you here today. I look forward to hosting this luncheon every year because we have the opportunity to honor an exceptional leader of Alzheimer's research with the Charles Evans Award. We thank ADDF board members Bonnie Pfeiffer Evans and Alice Shore of the Charles Evans Foundation for creating this award and joining us this afternoon as they do for every luncheon. We so appreciate your support. Please stand up. Don't be shy. I don't know exactly where Bonnie and Alice are, but they are somewhere in the room. And we look forward to presenting the award to a strong supporter, David Weinreb, a little bit later on. Yay, David. It does give me great comfort to be present here every year. I believe there is power in numbers, starting with all of you in the room today, and together through our shared commitment and our common goals, find a way to treat and perhaps someday even prevent Alzheimer's from taking hold. Through our continued support of the science, I am hopeful and optimistic that we will get there. As some of you may know, my mother is among the millions of people living with this terrible disease, and I know many of you have friends and family members who are also suffering through this diagnosis. My mom is 94 years old. She is, or at least more obviously, fiercely intelligent. Many years ago, she was a college professor, spoke 6 languages fluently. And sadly, since her diagnosis, we have watched a very steady decline. And our once fiercely proud, fiercely engaged, curious, wonderfully loving, light-filled mother has dimmed. And it has been very, very painful for us to see her and witness this torturous journey she has been on. And I know how many of you have also shared that journey, and that's why we are all here today, and there is hope. The ADDF is dedicated to finding drugs to prevent and treat Alzheimer's, and when you donate to the ADDF, every single dollar, 100% actually goes to research. So now it is my great privilege to introduce you to the ADDF's co-founder and chairman, Leonard Lauder.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I have remarks. However, everyone in this room has a reason for being here. The reason is we may have a loved one, a friend, our own self, me, you, or just the idea that what is coming, because as we get older, the disease comes closer and closer to us. So Samuel Johnson, who is the one who's the biographer of Boswell, said, "Nothing so focuses the mind as the sure and certain knowledge that you'll be hung in the morning." So here we are. So let me tell you why my brother Ronald and I founded the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation so many years ago. Because each of us had experiences in our own lives about what has happened with people who had Alzheimer's and why hope maybe wasn't there, but hope is now. My Aunt Renee had Alzheimer's, my mother's sister. I went to see her doctor. I'm not going to tell you the hospital he was at because we know too many people here. He said, "Just give me $1 million and I'll cure Alzheimer's." Okay? I gave him the $1 million. I never even got a thank you note. Okay. He's retired happily, and so I have a dear friend in Paris whose father has Alzheimer's. I said to her, "Why don't you get the test, the gene test, to see whether you have the Alzheimer's gene?" She said, "What difference does it make? Because there's no help, there's no cure. Why should I worry all my life?" That struck home, because that is what we're working on. ADDF is a pure play. We don't do care. We don't do advertising. We don't do races. We don't do anything. All we do is look for ways to cure Alzheimer's and to prevent Alzheimer's. Last year, over the past few years, we have supported nearly 600 research studies around the world, clinical research studies on Alzheimer's. Why? Because that's all we do. We just go after it. We're looking for the prevention and the cure. So that is what keeps us going. People often ask me, because of what I do in the world, I sell lipsticks, in case you're wondering what I do for a living. I can't wait to get up in the morning so I can call either Dr. Howard Fillit or Mark Roithmayr or something. Hey, I have an idea. This is what I spoke to. Last night I sat next to someone and he said, what we're working on sounds great, etc. My pledge that I've made to many of you who have been with us before is that we will win this race for you before too long. So many things are happening now. Every day is a dizzying experience. We're going to win this race, and we're going to win for all of you. My brother Ronald and I, Ronald, where are you? Ronald, thank you. Ronald is the inspiration of it, by the way. And Ronald, thank you for putting up with me for all these years. He's right. But the Lauder family supports the entire overhead of ADDF. And so all the money that you give is for research. And we will win. So all I can say to you is this. Now, I'm going to live long enough because I'm going to promise each and every one of you we will have the means of identifying and preventing and curing Alzheimer's before too long. That's my promise to you, and thank you. Paula, are you here? But I don't even have my remarks. You know something? I tore them up. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your support. And I promise you, today is the beginning of the rest of all of our lives. We will find Alzheimer's and make it history for you. Thank you.
Leonard, we are all counting on you in this room to live up to that promise. We're talking 120, 130. Please, please stay with us that long. There's probably no doubt in your minds, for those that you've been exposed to the work of the ADDF, to know that the Lauder family has assembled one of the most impressive group of scientists and doctors to help achieve that goal. So bravo again, the Lauder family. And today you have your chance to support this research and have some fun too by participating in the door prize drawing. Every donation is a chance to win a prize donated by some of our wonderful supporters in the room today. And all you need to do is fill out one of those cards. You will find many of them at your table. We've made it very easy for you. We have pencils and pens out there for you to use. And we have a surprise announcement to make now. Our honoree, David Weinreb, just told us that he is willing to match every door prize contribution that we've received today, all the way up to $100,000. So this is a fantastic opportunity to give as generously as you can, and our staff and volunteers will be wandering around the room to collect your cards during lunch, and the winners' names will be drawn and posted outside the ballroom at the end of today's event. So we're going to take a short break here and hope you enjoy your lunch until we return. Enjoy. Welcome back to our program. We hope you've enjoyed your lunch and your conversations at your tables. I have some good news for you. Over lunch alone, we made some $21,000 in door prize money, and yay. And for those of you who haven't taken the opportunity to fill out a card yet, you still have time. We would appreciate it, and a reminder that our honoree will match your contributions up to $100,000. So keep writing your name out. And volunteers, of course, are standing by to collect your cards. This will be the last time I get to play policewoman with the door prizes, but you can win some fabulous prizes, including an SD Lauder. We've heard of that company before, Beauty Basket. I checked it out. A lot of wonderful Lumiere products. A VIP concert experience at Seaport District, donated by our honoree David Weinreb, and a month of flower deliveries from the very folks that provided the arrangements on your table today, a wine connoisseur package, or a chance to win some nice golf outings, other sporting, cultural, and dining experiences. So we have some wonderfully generous people who are starting the process right now. David Clafter, I hear, John Levy, where are you all? That you filled out your cards and you're trying to get all the friends of David to do so. And Tom Scanlon, thank you for also donating. And as many of you know, November is National Alzheimer's Disease Awareness Month. And as Mark Roithmayr said, purple is the new black, and he was delighted by the sea of purple in the room today. And you probably all remember that back in 1983, this National Awareness Month was designated by President Ronald Reagan. And who would have known that just 10 years later, he would be diagnosed with the disease? And just a week or so, we heard the very sad news that Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has been diagnosed with the beginning stages of dementia, probably Alzheimer's disease. And Justice O'Connor has served as the honorary chair of the ADDF. You probably also know that Alzheimer's claimed the life of her beloved husband, John, in 2009. Other history bullet notes here. O'Connor, of course, was nominated to the Supreme Court by Ronald Reagan. And I don't know whether any of you took the opportunity to read her letter, but her poignant letter to the public last week had the same grace as President Reagan's letter announcing he had Alzheimer's disease. And it will really touch you to your core if you haven't had a chance to read it yet. The ADDF thanks Justice O'Connor for her strength and her bravery in sharing her diagnosis of dementia and serving as an advocate for Alzheimer's awareness and caregivers. As we heard, yes, I think that is befitting Sandra Day O'Connor. As we heard today, Alzheimer's is increasingly becoming more common, that is, as the population ages and more of us personally will be affected by it. Since President Reagan's diagnosis, we've learned a great deal, and it is my pleasure now to introduce you to Dr. Howard Fillit, the Executive Founding Director and Chief Science Officer of the ADDF. Howard?
Thank you so much, Paula. And thank you all for being here today and your faith and your support in ADDF and in our work. We really are very grateful, and we couldn't do any of it without you. I saw my first patient with Alzheimer's disease in 1979, almost 40 years ago. I've been caring for people with the disease ever since then. And I opened a first clinical trial at the Rockefeller University back in 1981. I opened the Alzheimer clinic there, and I've been doing research on it ever since. So about 40 years in this space, probably longer than most of you will admit being alive at this point. And I just give that perspective because when I started, back in 1980, there was literally nothing known about Alzheimer's disease. We had no idea what the causes were. We really didn't know how to diagnose it, and there were certainly no drugs on the market. So let me give you an idea about why I'm so optimistic today, because I think what's going on today is just amazing. First of all, from 35 years of research in the basic knowledge of Alzheimer's disease, the basic science, we know a lot about what causes Alzheimer's disease. I would say fairly that we know almost as much about what causes Alzheimer's today as we know about what causes heart disease and cancer. The thing is, we haven't translated all that knowledge we've gained in the last 35, 40 years into new drugs. And it takes about 30, 35 years to translate that knowledge. Cholesterol was discovered as a risk factor for heart disease in the 1950s. The first drugs for hyperlipidemia didn't come out, the statins, till the mid-1980s. So we're lag time behind a few decades behind cancer and heart disease, but we're catching up rapidly. We have ways to diagnose it definitively now that you've heard about. We have this PET scan now that we help to develop that can definitively, with 95% certainty, tell people if they have Alzheimer's disease. If I see someone in my practice on Tuesday and they want to know and all they have is a little bit of memory loss and we can't really be sure what's wrong with them, I just write a prescription to the radiologist. They can go over there the same day, and by the next morning I have the radiology report and I know if that person has Alzheimer's disease. That's amazing. That's truly incredible to me. And we also have spinal tap ways to do that aren't used as much. We have 120 drugs in clinical development in the pipeline, and this is amazing. And we have ways of preventing Alzheimer's disease. We've had some success recently. Just came back from Barcelona and the international meetings. Saw reports from some of the major pharmaceutical companies, again, using this brain scan that ADDF helped to develop and was approved as the first diagnostic test by the FDA in 2012. Using that brain scan, Biogen and other companies are enrolling for the first time 100% of people that actually have amyloid in their brain. Prior to that, people were being enrolled in these trials, and then we found out, and actually it was done by Lilly, who's one of our sponsors today and partners, in their trial of solanezumab, it was found out that 35% of the people, up to 35% of the people in these trials that were enrolled by dementia experts around the world did not have amyloid in their brain, and they did not have Alzheimer's disease. And recent studies from the Centers for Medicare have shown that 50% of the time, doctors are wrong in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, as proven by the use of the brain scan. And we're hoping that that study will lead to better reimbursement and availability of the trial. The Biogen study using the brain scan, which is detecting amyloid in the brain as a major target, and half of the 120 clinical trials going on now, fortunately or unfortunately, are focused on this one target, which is amyloid, beta amyloid, which is in the main component of the plaques. But for the first time, what we saw was that these antibodies, these vaccines that attack the amyloid in the brain, that at 18 months of treatment, 80% of the people had complete removal of the plaques, which was the intention of the drug. So we can say with pretty good certainty that the drug actually worked. Now, of course, the obvious question is, if we remove the plaques, does that mean that people are going to get better? And there is very good data. This was only what we call a phase 1b trial. Not a lot of people, but there was a dose-related slowing of the rate of decline in cognitive impairment over that 18 months on several measures of cognition and function. And this is looking better and better as we've seen further analysis. Now, it needs to be done in a phase 3 trial. And that's what Biogen and other companies are moving to now. So we have 10 phase 3 trials going on in our space. 9 of them are anti-amyloid, and 1 of them is not anti-amyloid. It attacks a novel target. It's a company called Agene Bio. The company is in phase 3. It was spun out of Johns Hopkins, and ADDF is one of the major contributors to Michaela Gallagher's research that led to the founding of Agene Bio. And we are investors in Agene Bio. So we can say proudly, I think, that of the 10 clinical trials in phase 3 right now, 10 different drugs, that we are supporting the only one that's a novel target. And that's the role of ADDF. We are very committed to funding clinical trials of novel targets, because that's what we need in this space. We need innovation. We need drugs to attack the inflammation that occurs in this disease. We need drugs that are working on the epigenetics of this disease, how our DNA and the DNA machinery is altered with aging. In fact, we have a scientific strategy that is not reliant just on the beta amyloid, but is much more holistic and parsimonious. And that strategy recognizes the leading risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. What is the leading risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? It's aging. Aging. Now, that's important. That sounds simplistic, but there's a tremendous body of knowledge about the biology of aging that goes way back to the 1940s. And unfortunately, I'm a geriatrician. I learned and studied gerontology. Most of the people in Alzheimer's research are neurologists, and they're not aware of all this biology of aging. We have a major viewpoint coming out in a leading journal in January about this issue of how we can translate all this knowledge about the biology of aging into new therapeutics for Alzheimer's disease. And so our portfolio, we stopped funding anti-amyloid therapies about 10 years ago because, for one thing, the baton had been passed to Big Pharma that has the clout to run these $400, $500 million studies, $1 billion, $2 billion programs. Our job is seed funding biotech companies. Our job is getting into Series A and early stage financing of biotech companies with novel drugs because they're high risk, and that's the role of philanthropy. It's to fund high-risk projects in our society. So that's where we're focused. Of the 120 drugs, and there's 120 drugs going on, being tested now in our space. Are we behind cancer? Yeah. Cancer's got about 3,000 drugs going on now in cancer space, but cancer research started with Albert Lasker Jr. in the 1920s. And the NIH, which is the leading funder of research in our country, started in 1948 primarily as a cancer center. I saw the first patients with Alzheimer's started in 1980. So we are 30, 40 years behind, but we're going to learn a lot from cancer. And so we have 120 drugs, but compare that to when I started in the field, there was 0. So is 120 drugs in clinical trials exciting? It really is. And we're supporting, I don't know how we did it, to be honest, but our modest foundation is supporting 20% of those 120 trials. And when you think about the fact that half of them are anti-amyloid, then that percentage seems even greater. So we're funding novel, innovative therapeutics, not only in academia, but also in biotechnology companies. And we've made 110 biotechnology investments in the last 20 years. When I started the foundation with Ronald and Leonard, I did a survey of the number of biotechs in the United States that had any kind of program in Alzheimer's disease. There were 1,600 biotech companies in the United States in 1998, and three of them had any kind of pretty lousy program in Alzheimer's disease. We've supported 110, including 12 startups out of academia, and we get a return on investment. 2/3 of the drugs that we're funding right now are in phase 2. Phase 2 is really important because that's the first time that a drug is actually tested for its effectiveness in human beings. Phase 1 is safety. Phase 2 is also safety, but it's the first time that these trials are tested for, these drugs are tested for efficacy. And 2/3 of the trials that we're funding right now are in phase 2. Over half of the trials are prevention trials. So we're testing these drugs in a stage of Alzheimer's called MCI, or mild cognitive impairment. This is a stage when people come into the office and they have memory problems. And the wife might say, he keeps repeating me, and he can't keep a schedule, or he can't keep the checkbook anymore. But those are very mild functional deficits, and quality of life is maintained. And what we want to do is prevent the progression of MCI to dementia. And more than half of our trials are being done in people with MCI. But amazingly, because of that brain scan, we can also detect amyloid 20, 30 years before people even get MCI or any kind of symptoms. And right now, there are prevention trials going on where people, normal people in the community, are being screened for the presence of Alzheimer's disease using the PET scan, and then they're going into clinical trials. So this is primary prevention. This is like people who are taking statins who have never had a heart attack, but all they have is high cholesterol. Now, cholesterol leads me to the second part of my progress report to you, which is biomarkers. When we were incorporated, Ronald and Leonard and our lawyers said we were going to do 3 things, and this goes back in 1998. And it was brilliant. When I think back about what was said back then in the incorporation papers to what we're doing now, it was laser-focused mission, and it was exactly what we said we were going to do, and it was really very visionary. Number 1, we were going to develop biomarkers. Why? Because we want to be able to diagnose people in the community, and we want to be able to use them to accelerate clinical development. And I've already told you how the amyloid imaging scan that was that is currently owned by Lilly, that we helped to develop at the University of Pennsylvania starting in 1999, has really, this is not my words, this is the words of an editorial from a leading neurology journal, has revolutionized the field of clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease, because 100% of the people that go in, as I said before, have amyloid, and then it's used for monitoring. So it's also led to prevention. So our three missions were biomarkers, treatment, and prevention. And those biomarkers, the PET scan has enabled us to do prevention trials by identifying people before they have any symptoms. The problem with neuroimaging, and it's not really a big problem, but it's a problem right now, is cost and time. It's radiology. What we want is the equivalent of a blood test. We want a cholesterol for Alzheimer's disease. And that's happening. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's happening right now. We're part of consortia with the NIH right now, where, as I mentioned, as we talked about this morning at the symposium, maybe in 3 years, maybe something like that, we're going to have a blood test for Alzheimer's disease. And that's going to be like the cholesterol was for atherosclerosis and lipid management. It's inexpensive, it's widely available, it's quick, it's reliable because it's being developed in correlation with what's happening in the brain on a PET scan or in the spinal fluid. And it's going to revolutionize the field. It's going to make early diagnosis widely available in primary care. It's going to help with recruitment into clinical trials. It's going to help with getting into clinical trials and monitoring therapy. And it's going to reduce the expense of these $400 or $500 million studies considerably. But we need more. And that's why right now, we have announced this recently, the Diagnostics Accelerator. Now, what happened was Bill Gates' father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we met Bill about 5 years ago. And I have to tell you that I was very impressed. He had done his homework 5 years ago, and he knew a lot about Alzheimer's disease then. And then we got a call, and it turned out that Bill and his team were doing due diligence around the country to find a foundation to partner with. And Mark Roithmayr and I worked very hard with their team to enable them to look inside our machine and see whatever they wanted. We told them about our strategy, about our projects. They knew about us. And long story short, I'm very humbled to say that after extensive due diligence, Bill Gates picked us as a partner to develop a blood test. And this has helped us attract other prominent families like the Ray Dolby family that we already had a partnership with, and the Charles Schwab family, and others that I can't mention yet, but other prominent families. So this becomes like a $35, maybe $40 million effort at commercializing a blood test, and not just the amyloid blood test, because where we want to go is like cancer. We want to learn from cancer. Cancer has something going on called precision medicine. It's not just about the tumor in your lung on the x-ray. It's about the biology of the tumor that directs you to get the right drug at the right time for the right person. And that biology might be a lung tumor, it might be a brain tumor, it might be any kind of tumor. It's really about the drug appropriateness. That's where we want to go with Alzheimer's. We know already that there are subsets of people with Alzheimer's. By definition, they have amyloid in their brain. By definition, they have tau tangles in their brain. And actually, we can image the tangles now as well, which is really amazing and important. But what we also know is, for example, that there's inflammation in the brain. Alzheimer described in 1906 that there's inflammation in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease, but it was disregarded. I went to the NIH in 1983, and I told them there's inflammation in the brain, and they basically threw me out. But today, inflammation is a really important drug target, and we need biomarkers for inflammation, especially in the brain, because people, as you know, 30% of people can have amyloid in their brain, and their cognition doesn't worsen. Why is that? Because it turns out that amyloid is a risk factor. But if you have inflammation around the amyloid and all the other deposited proteins in the brain that associate with it, that the inflammation is the neurotoxic component, more likely, that is causing the cognitive decline and the death of neuronal cells. So we need biomarkers for inflammation, and we already have that because we actually have spinal fluid biomarkers for inflammation, but we want to get blood biomarkers that are neuronal specific that can help us identify those people who have Alzheimer's disease with amyloid in their brain, with tangles, who have inflammation, and give them anti-neuroinflammatory specific drugs. And the largest part of our target portfolio right now are anti-neuroinflammatory drugs. So I've talked to you about our clinical trial program. I've talked to you about biomarkers and how important they are. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is prevention. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, I might have stood up here and said, what's good for your heart is good for your brain, based on some evidence, but I wouldn't, as a scientist, have felt that there was really strong data to support what I was telling you. This was sort of a clinical recommendation. Today, we have data from multi-interventional, multifactorial clinical trials, randomized, placebo-controlled, if you will, clinical trials of prevention that show if you do basically 7 things, which are heart healthy type things: exercise, don't smoke, eat a Mediterranean type diet, if you're overweight, lose weight, don't drink too much alcohol, if you have diabetes, hypertension, high blood lipids, control all those. If you're socially isolated, if you're depressed, make sure that you fix that because that's bad for your brain. And if you do those 7 things, these multi-interventional trials have shown something called the finger study out of Finland, that you can reduce the risk of getting Alzheimer's disease by upwards of 35%. That's amazing, because it's been shown that if we could reduce the risk, if we could delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease by just 5 years, from 75 average age of onset to 80, we would reduce the number of living cases of people with Alzheimer's disease by 50%. And these multi-interventional lifestyle studies are showing that we can do that. There was recent data to show that what's called the incidence, while the prevalence, the number of cases is going up because the baby boomers are hitting Golden Pond, the incidence at each specific age group, this came out of a study called the Framingham study, is actually going down the same way. And it's probably because people are living healthy lifestyles. So prevention can work. And we heard this morning from Dr. Richard Isaacson, who's running a wonderful prevention clinic and program that we're collaborating with to teach doctors and lay people through his Alzheimer's University about the value of prevention for Alzheimer's disease. So in conclusion, let me say that, yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm amazed that in my professional lifetime, we've gone from nothing, literally nothing, to where we stand today, where we have diagnostic tests, we have treatments that are showing progress, we have 120 drugs in clinical trials, we know we can prevent this disease, and I'm just so grateful to all of you for all your support, all of your partnership. Without you, we definitely could not do this. Thank you so much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Fillit, for your many decades of dedication to fighting this disease. As you could hear, it's very encouraging to know that there are so many efforts underway to find better ways to treat this disease, to delay its onset, and actually prevent it from developing. This is certainly a very important time in Alzheimer's research, and that's why philanthropy matters so much. And every year at this luncheon, we honor those philanthropists who really go above and beyond in their support for Alzheimer's research. And this year's honoree, David Weinreb, is no exception, as you will hear. It is now my pleasure to introduce the ADDF's co-founder and co-chairman, Ronald Lauder, who will present this year's Charles Evans Award.
Thank you, Paula. But before I start, I'd like to say 3 things. First of all, for 30 years, I've been wondering where that $1 million went. And secondly, I didn't have the first course. I was waiting for the main course. And thirdly, the notes that Leonard ripped up were my notes. This can be a very unusual speech. First of all, Paula, you're a wonderful host, and we're really grateful for your time and all you do for ADDF. It's now my great pleasure to present, we're looking for a law, the Charles Evans Award to a great friend of ADDF, David R. Weinreb. David truly demonstrates the spirit of this award. The prize was created by Alice Shaw, Charles Evans' sister, and Bonnie Fife Evans, his wife, who are trustees of the Charles Evans Foundation and ADDF. Alice and Bonnie wanted to honor funders who made a significant contribution to Alzheimer's research. And that was certainly what Charles did. Charles turned challenges into success in his personal life. He turned tragedies into philanthropic causes. One of the causes was Alzheimer's research. His father suffered from Alzheimer's. Charles and the entire Evans family were caregivers as they watched their father fade from life. They felt hopeless, and Charles understood he had to do something to change this. So he applied his energy to Alzheimer's research. He also serves as National Director of the Alzheimer Association. His hope carried on through people like David Weinreb, who support research that will create treatments. I'd like to invite Alice and Bonnie on stage, along with my brother Leonard. Okay? Where are they? It takes about 10 minutes to get up here. Now, David is, for many of you who don't know, is Chief Executive Officer and member of the Board of Directors of the Howard Hughes Corporation. I didn't know there was a Howard Hughes Corporation, but he has won awards as entrepreneur and top CEO. Today, we recognize David's outstanding commitment and contributions to find a cure for Alzheimer's. This man takes risks, and he knows that is what ADDF is all about. His mother has Alzheimer's, and his father is a dedicated caregiver. He knows the anguish of a primary caregiver who is often so overwhelmed. That is what motivates David to help us at ADDF. He does this for his family. He also does it for millions of families like his. David, please come up here and join us, and everyone else, please. Alice, where are you? Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm so incredibly humbled to be receiving this honor. Truly, I don't deserve it. My introduction to ADDF came through an intimate luncheon hosted by Susan Goodfriend and ADDF board member Pamela Newman. It was inspiring to learn about all of the work and research being done to find a cure. It is worth noting that I have been involved with Alzheimer's-related organizations for many years, including those created by my dear friends Maria Shriver and Larry Ruvo. Alzheimer's gained significance in my life about 10 years ago when my mother began to be affected by this debilitating disease. Her condition has deteriorated significantly each year, to the point where she most often does not know who I am when I come to visit. Although she does seem to know that I am someone special in her life. You see, my mom has a form of dementia called Lewy body, which causes her, among other things, to have active hallucinations. further separating her from reality and complicating care for her. Losing my mother in this way has been very difficult for me, and especially difficult for my children. It has been particularly hard for me to see the impact that my mother's illness has had on my father. Believing that everything in life happens for a reason, I know that it is now my responsibility to help find a cure for this terrible illness so deeply impacting my family. What is most frightening to me is that our story is not unique. Alzheimer's is already one of the leading causes of death in the world. A new person develops Alzheimer's in the US every minute, and one's risk of developing this disease doubles every 5 years after turning 65. I don't like those odds. Alzheimer's will impact each of us directly or indirectly in some way. Unless we find a cure, it will only become more destructive and affect tens of millions more. However, there is good reason to be hopeful about the research being done. Dr. Howard Fillit, who you just heard from, is a renowned leader in this field and an incredibly talented individual making progress to help rid the world of this horrible illness. On top of that, he is a smart, lovable, great guy who I'm pleased to call my friend. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the ADDF and all of the extraordinary individuals that make the organization as special as it is. Those of you who know me have heard me say that nothing in life happens by accident, and it is no work of chance that this organization stands out. First, I'd like to thank Leonard and Ronald Lauder. One of the key differentiators, as we've heard about today, of the ADDF is that 100% of every dollar donated goes directly to research. That is so extraordinary. The result of the overwhelming generosity bestowed on the ADDF by the Lauders, who fund all the organization's operating costs. On behalf of everyone in this room, thank you so very much to both of you. A heartfelt thank you to the entire ADDF board for their continued support of this critical cause, and specifically to Jenny and Giorgio. If you don't know them, you should. The ADDF is fortunate to have such committed and dedicated people working on its behalf. Thank you to you both for all of your help in making this luncheon a success. I would also like to thank my host committee and the Howard Hughes team for all of your support, as well as my friends and business partners who made significant contributions for this day, but equally important, for always being there for me. Thank you. And I also want to recognize my family, including my sister Amy, who made the trip from Texas to be up with us today. I'd be remiss not to take a moment to thank the three things that drive me most in my life. My three greatest accomplishments, my children. Zach and Carly, who live in New York and are here today to share this moment with me. And my son Kyle, who lives and works in California. I also want to recognize my future daughter-in-law, Zach's fiancée, Jackie, and my future son-in-law, AJ, although he hasn't asked Carly to marry him yet. So We'll see where that goes. No pressure. No pressure. I love him. He's a great young man. And of course, my beautiful and amazing partner, Anna. I love you very much. And I love my family, and it really drives me to do everything that I do in my life. Finally, a special thank you to my office, Diana and Kay. Kay for putting up with me for the last 24 years. Who, in addition to continuing to handle everything else she is working on, played such an instrumental role, including countless phone calls in making this luncheon a rocking success and bringing attention to this important cause. I love you both, wherever you are in the room. And I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce someone really special to me. I was thinking about what would make this day most memorable. And I thought to myself, who better than to introduce my best friend? What's significant about that is that he also happens to be my father. They say that Alzheimer's can be most devastating to caretakers who take on the burden of caring for the sick, their loved ones. My dad has been nothing short of amazing in caring for my mother in this difficult stage of her life. And he has truly been the ultimate role model for the entire family, showing us what it means to love someone unconditionally and truly caring for them in their darkest moment. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my father, Neil Weinreb.
I am what David said. But mostly I'm a caregiver. A caregiver and a husband, like many of you sitting out there. A husband who worries 24 hours a day, watching my lovely wife of 63 years struggle to talk, walk, or even eat. She is hostage to a wheelchair and seldom gets out of the house. She's declining every month, though I have trouble admitting it. I don't want to admit it. I don't want to believe that this beautiful woman who shared my dreams, my hopes, my ambitions, and slept beside me all these years, is now a shell of her former self. She's wasting away in a hospital bed beside me. She doesn't know my name or who I am most of the time. She certainly doesn't understand what a husband is. She knows my smile, my eyes, my face, and she particularly loves the kisses that I give her every morning and night when we're together. This is a woman who walked 2 miles a day, read newspapers from cover to cover, could discuss politics, fashion, sports, the world, or any other subject she decided to entertain. She's drifting away now without any knowledge of where she has been, where she's going, or who she is. I don't profess to be a doctor, a scientist, or a dedicated researcher. I'm just a husband, just a caregiver, desperately in love with a woman whose heart belongs to me forever. And all I can give her now is my love and the care she's getting at home. Don't misunderstand, I'm very grateful for the fact that I can pay the people that helped me offer her such wonderful care. Many people are not in my position. I know that, and I think about it often. What is dementia? I think I can tell you quickly. Close your eyes out there for a moment. All of you, just close your eyes for just a moment. Think of your best friend, your family, your children, your wife, all the wonderful places you've been, and the more wonderful places you're going to. And now open them. It's all gone, forgotten, wiped clean. No memory. No memory of them, no memory of where you've been, no memory of where you're going. That's dementia. As cruel and as rugged as it is. It's a known fact, however, that this hideous, ravaging destroyer of families can strike anyone. Any one of you sitting out there. Or me. It doesn't differentiate by color. It doesn't differentiate by age. It is destroying the dreams of a lifetime. Anina, my wife, suffers, as you heard David say, from Lewy body dementia, defined by active hallucinations, and in many cases, bouts of palsy. As such, she talks to me every morning about the armed men who pillage our home, or the non-existent children that visit her daily with gifts and candy. I wish I could understand her. I wish I could converse with her or understand the mumbles that tumble out of her mouth, but I can't. With all I have described, I'm blessed with a family who offers me the support I desperately need. 7 grandchildren who really don't understand any of this, but who manage to call to see how things are with their grandmother and with me. 2 daughters, one in Canada, much too far away, and one, thank God, in Dallas, my Amy, who is here today, as you heard David say, who finds time to cook a meal or come by to see how things are with her mom. Lastly, a son. Not just any son, but a son who has taken up the cause, this cause, and whose creativity and vision led him here today. I think he set a new standard for giving at this luncheon, and I couldn't be more proud. For his mom, his love, his support, and his voice bring her the respite she needs. He's made it possible for her to look forward to a massage every week and a piano player, believe it or not, who plays the music she so enjoys even though she doesn't understand it. My son is there night and day for me as well. When the phone rings at midnight from around the world, I know who it is. He's made his mission in life to see that I travel any opportunity I get with him. And as much as I may object, I find that when I'm away, it does clear my head. It does give me what I need, that little bit of time myself. I know his love comes from the fact that we have not just been father and son, but believe it or not, we've been best friends all our life. That and the fact that he knows what his mother means to me. And I know that that motivates his actions. What we then, we poor souls that take care of the afflicted, what do we have? What do we have to leave this luncheon with? We have hope. We have hope, and it's a powerful force. And it's made even more powerful by those of you sitting out here, joining everybody today, by your contributions, by your pledges, by all the things you have done to be part of this. It's what drives me every day to know that we will find something soon, I hope, to at least curtail this desperate falling of these people to a lower and lower place. And ultimately, I know with every being that's in me, I know that we will find a cure. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to take just a moment to introduce something that I think will give you a lot of pleasure. It's very meaningful to me, and I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, who was here? Did someone come to visit you?
Nobody yet.
No.
Nobody yet.
I think Zach stopped over.
Jack did.
Yeah, my oldest son, Zach.
Yeah.
And his fiancée, Jackie.
Yes, see. Jackie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were here.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, and they were lovely, weren't they?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Shall we sing a song together? I love this song because it makes me think of you. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high,
Good.
there's a land that I dream of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why, then why can't I? Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds wanted to share that with you because this was when I was home last weekend, and Zach and Jackie had been to the house about 10 minutes before I came over. That's how long her memory, how quickly she forgets, really on an immediate basis. I'm so grateful and moved by everyone's generosity helping the ADDF. Dad, thank you so much for being so inspirational, for being my hero, and for what you're doing for our mother. In recognition of my support for ADDF, you heard Paula mention earlier that I would match any gift, but I'm just going to go ahead and commit the $100,000, and whatever anyone else does here will get us a step closer to such an important thing. I think that's all. It's humbling to receive this award, but the truth is my father should be receiving this award, not me. And my mom was an amazing woman, and I wish you would have known her. Thank you.
Well, what do you say after what we've all heard here today? I don't think I've ever heard anyone give such a loving, honest, and raw account of what it is like to watch someone you love slowly disappear before your eyes. Neil, thank you for gracing our afternoon with your love, your commitment. And David, congratulations to you. Thank you very much for your generosity. The Lauder family, of course, all of you in this room. I hope you leave the room as inspired as I have been this afternoon by what you have heard. To the extraordinary scientists and doctors who are leading the way, we have deep gratitude for your efforts as well. So I want you to leave the room on a celebratory note. We set an all-time record today. We have raised almost $1.5 million. Bravo. Thank you again for your generosity. Let's keep on fighting, and congratulations again to the Weinrebs. Have a good rest of the afternoon.